Many of our volunteers are former clients who want to give back. How do we maintain professional boundaries while honoring their connection to our mission?
That's a great question. And I'm super excited to hear about former clients wanting to give back. That doesn't always happen.
Yeah.
Right, Andy? How many times do you see that? Usually people are like, oh, good, I got what I needed, and they move on with life. And so I'm curious to know what this organization did to make that experience. Obviously, it was a good experience. I think a couple of things come to mind as far as with any volunteer program. I'm a big believer in making sure that there's all the stuff that we talk about on this podcast, right? Do you have policies? Do you have training? Are there particular roles that you put volunteers in that might be more appropriate for somebody who actually was a client? So, like what I'm thinking of specifically, professional boundaries. It sounds like the person who asked this is probably concerned about what if the former client is now a volunteer and is working with people that were in the program with them or something like that? Like, could that become an issue, or could they're so close to the program and their own experience that they're not able to actually separate it? So I think there's a bit of discernment that has to come in with figuring out what this volunteer, like, what is their strength and skill set and the best place to put them? Like, do they have, and provide them with the training? Like, this is how we approach, our not knowing enough about the mission, but this is how we approach our mission. And this is how we approach our program from a standpoint of making sure we don't give unsolicited advice that isn't backed by whatever our data and what actually works for somebody who's going through these topics or whatever. Like, it just needs to be really crystal clear, I think, as part of it. And, it might also be a bit like, what is clarity around confidentiality expectations, and just making sure that's clear. I think that sometimes one of the best roles I've seen former clients play when they want to give back is being actually your organization's spokesperson, speaking at an event, sharing their story, like if they're willing to do that, like, and they're actually offering to do that and they're decent at it, like, invite them in. It's a perfect example to show like a testament of here's where I am now and here's what this organization helped me do. But that all goes back to the original thing of like, what are their strengths, skills, and what are your volunteer opportunities for them? And how do you like make sure you're connecting whatever they are good at with what you're good at, while also making sure that if there's some confidentiality, that if there's policies or things related to confidentiality or not crossing over some line to give personal advice based on your own life experience, like whatever that is, making sure that is shared. So that's what comes up for me. How about you?
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot to add. You pretty much covered it. I'd say it really depends on what we're talking about in terms of the mission of the organization and what these clients' relationship was with you to begin with. Because I can see scenarios where it feels like it would be inappropriate to bring former clients back in certain situations, right? I can imagine ones that would just be really uncomfortable and weird, so it's really hard to say, yeah, totally do this. I would like to echo Stacey's point, which was that if you've got former clients who are interested in your mission and wanting to participate with you further, you're already doing a really, really good job. Maybe if there isn't some obvious way that they could participate in the mission the way you would normally have every other volunteer participate, maybe they can be part of an advisory group or to use that sort of on the ground knowledge of what it's like to be a client and use that to help sort of inform things going forward. I could imagine like some kind of advisory council or, offer to have communication with the marketing development teams to let them know this is what it's like to be a client of this organization, because that can be really relevant for stuff going forward. But yeah, not a whole lot to add, but it sounds like you're doing a great job already.
I like the advisory council idea, and I do want to piggyback off that because I think more and more what we're hearing in a lot of a lot of the nonprofit sector around the country and really around the world is how do we make sure that our programs and our services are informed by the very people who went through them, right? Imagine that, right? We don't have some hierarchical decision making with people who have no clue and have never experienced the situation. So I love that idea, Andy, and I think that's a super cool way too to involve folks in helping be your thought partners as you're looking at what to tweak or roll out or change or add or whatever. Like that would be super cool. And who knows, depending on the person, I mean, and depending on kind of what your strategy is for your board, I have seen some powerful examples of people who, you know, really have benefited from services and the mission and have actually served on board and had a voice at the board and really empowered those people. I did that. I actually did work recently with an organization that it's basically like a nonprofit law firm, right? And they provide access to justice and equal, just making sure people are represented who couldn't represent themselves and things. And I mean, half of their board is comprised of the very people who have benefited. And it's amazing how it just shifts the entire conversation and dynamic and keeps it so mission centered. It is really powerful. So yeah, I'm excited to see what this organization does with this, and what a cool opportunity that you actually have people reaching out. Most organizations, I think, are looking for things like this, and you've got it right at your fingertips.
Yeah, I can think of situations where, certainly in the food bank world, some of our best employees were people that were former clients. And one of the reasons that they came to us is because they trusted us, that we'd done a good enough job in that scenario that they wanted to say, I would like to work there because that seems like a good place to work, that they're doing good work. And I mean, that's like the best stamp of approval for being an employer, is that the people that you serve want to actually come work for you. That always made me really proud.
Nonprofit governance.
Nonprofit answers.
Nonprofit board.
Nonprofit management.
Nonprofit marketing.
Nonprofit resources.
Welcome to Nonprofit Everything, the podcast where hosts Andy Shurick and Stacey Wedding answer your questions about all things nonprofit.
Hey, y'all. Thank you for joining us. I felt a little Texan with that. Hey, y'all. I didn't say hey, y'all, but it felt like that. So, hey, everybody. This is Stacey Wedding. Welcome to another episode of Nonprofit Everything. I am here with my co-host extraordinaire, Andy Shurick, and we're so glad to have you with us for another jam-packed episode of lots of good questions. We keep getting some really good ones, and we're just so appreciative of those of you who are reaching out, sharing with us what's on your mind. So keep them coming. Before we get into today's episode, I was thinking, Andy, how not everyone, because they don't see us, they just hear our voices. They may wonder like what our surroundings look like. And if we have something around us, like in our recording studio, which is basically rooms in our houses, respective homes, what it is that we kind of are really like digging in the room that we record out of. So what do you like in your room? So share a picture with our, give a visual for our listeners so they can have that in their head.
Yeah. So I work out of this office, so there's mostly work stuff in it. And I think I know, because Stacey and I are on video, so I think I know the thing that she's thinking I'm going to say, because directly behind me is a picture of Elvis painted on velvet that a good friend of mine, he's crying. I think he's either singing. I always think he's singing "Are You Lonesome Tonight?" That's what I assume that he's singing in that picture. He's got a tear coming down his face. It's beautiful. But that's actually not my favorite thing in my office. My favorite thing in my office, Stacey has not seen. This is a paperweight of a dead bird. It is a bronze or brass paperweight that's cast like a bird that's just like laying on the ground. I've had it with me for years. It was on my desk when I worked at the Springs Preserve, and there were staff members that refused to come. The one staff member in particular refused to come in my office because it was on my desk. It terrified her. She thought it was way too creepy. And so I also had a My Little Pony Rainbow Dash. And when she'd come into my office, I'd take the bird paperweight off my desk and put Rainbow Dash there instead, so that she felt okay to come in. And then that sort of turned into a My Little Pony thing. And all of a sudden my office was completely full of My Little Pony stuff. And for anybody that was in my office at the food bank too, there was My Little Pony stuff all over the place because of the bird.
Do have to say, I think I may be in the My Little Pony camp, Andy. I just want to say, I think I am feeling a little traumatized just by you showing me on our virtual screen the dead paperweight beer. So what is it about that specifically you find so appealing?
So my wife gave it to me for one of our anniversaries. Number one, it was like, so
oh boy,
we like to,
sorry to her. I don't mean to offend her, but yeah.
No. And it's, I don't know. I think it's beautiful. I think it's a very well, I mean, it's not morbid at all. I don't think it's a very well done, a little piece of art, and it's super unexpected. It's absolutely, when I had an office that people would come into regularly, it was absolutely a topic of conversation in the office for sure. Like, what is that?
That's super cool when you have those things. Yeah, like when you have those kind of things that catch people off guard and they're like, that's not normal, right? Mm-hmm. So, okay, folks, you got a little sneak peek into Andy's world. So maybe he'll ask me that question sometime in the future. But for now, you're just going to, or one of you can. But for now, I'm going to keep you in suspense and go enjoy, hopefully, another episode. Andy, here's a question for you. We are a smaller nonprofit and recently went through an audit. Our auditor emailed us and shared that our total program expenses to overall expenses is 78%. They said this was a little low for an organization our size and suggested that we review the professional fees and salaries allocations to ensure they are accurate. Is this a fair and reasonable comment given the different types and sizes of nonprofits? Are we really supposed to fit in a certain box based on our budget size? And how much should we worry about not fitting in that box in terms of public perception?
So I'll start here. So the feedback email for this podcast, if you have something that you need to give us feedback on, you can send it to Andy@nonprofiteverything.com, or you can send it to Stacey@nonprofiteverything.com, and we will see your direct feedback. So I'm going to go off on auditors for just a second. So if you're an auditor listening to this podcast, you've written down my email address and you can just send me hate mail directly to me. So don't send it to Stacey. Don't send it to your poor nonprofit clients. Send it to Andy. So number one, your auditor emailed and said that 78% was a little bit low for program expenses for an organization of your size. Since this podcast is rated G, I'm going to say, what? There's literally no basis in fact anywhere in any guidance anywhere that would give you any reason to say any number is good or bad for program expenses for a nonprofit of a given size. So we're going to have to reset our counter to 0, because we're going to have to talk about the overhead myth again for a second.
I know. Yeah, you need to fill everyone in on this, but yeah.
So and again, from inside the house, it feels like this question's been asked and answered a million times. Like the fiction that an organization needs to spend a significant fraction of its expenses on things that can be categorized on the functional expense statement as program has been completely debunked, and it's been debunked for years. And the reason it's been debunked is because every nonprofit is different. Everybody has different sets of resources that are coming in, different sets of expenses. They're working in different communities. They're working on different missions. They do things in different ways. And so it's impossible to take two nonprofits, even if they're identical in what they do, unless they're the exact same nonprofit. Like you compare one year over year, like maybe like the same organization year over year might be relevant, but any two nonprofits, you can't compare them against each other. So there's no way to say that 78% is a good or a bad number for anybody at any time for any reason. And I think the reason that you got this is because auditors are just weird people in general. I mean, their whole purpose is to sort of look at accounting rules and then look at what you did and then kind of come up with reasons to pick it all apart. Again, Andy at nonprofiteverything.com is the feedback email. Just send it right to me. So I think after you've calmed down, after you've taken a deep breath, had a glass of water, maybe walked around the block a couple of times, then
how about a glass of wine?
Maybe
I say a glass of wine.
If that helps, that might make me worse. We can like maybe think about what the auditor is trying to say, because they did give you a little bit more information in this one. Like, first of all, the 78% thing is nonsense and you can just ignore it. What they do say is that you can review your professional fees and salaries allocations. So this is actually the clue in the question that they gave back to you. And what they're saying is when somebody works on something, it's your nonprofit. Like if there's an employee and they have a job and they're doing things, some of the things that they're doing are for the programs that you're doing in the organization. And some of them are for fundraising and some of them are for just management, administrative, regular stuff. And there's some very specific rules. So if you look, the FASB has very specific guidance on what counts in each one of those categories. So what your auditor is telling you is that maybe you need to look at your people and have them do a timesheet and figure out what percentage of their time can truly be applied to program services so that you can count that as part of your program allocation in your statement of functional expenses. Because if you're just saying, oh, this person's an admin, so I coded them all 100% to administration, like there's a fair chance if they answer the phone, do we still have phones? If they answer the phone and they're giving people information about your program, that could be a program expense. That isn't necessarily just administration. So administration would be like filing, taking checks to the bank, if we even still do that, like all of these like basic activities about running the business. But if it has anything to do with like delivering services, you can count that time as program, which means that salary, the taxes, the insurance, all the things that are related to that employee can be provided into that program bucket, which theoretically can change the percentage of program. And the reason you want to do that is not necessarily because you have to do this functional expense statement and we're trying to hit some random number that the Better Business Bureau came up with in 1978, but that we can really see how much does it cost to do our program activities? Like, so how much does it, like, so I can have a conversation with my donor that says, for every $20 you can give us, you can help one kid do this, right? Or whatever our mission is. So that's kind of the direction you probably want to go.
I also just want to piggyback back to the fact that every nonprofit is different. And I am completely in agreement with everything you said, Andy. And actually this question made my hair go like stand straight up. Like I was just like, this is nuts. And I did have some choice words when I read it because I was just like, this is a bunch of BS. I mean, even to the point of when you talk about like this overhead myth, I mean, even to the point that some of the watchdog quote organizations over the years that were historically used ratios like Charity Navigator and stuff, they actually switched some of because they got so much pushback about like, I mean, they still have ratios, but it's just different. They've changed them and been a lot more flexible because it's like, you can't compare organizations. I mean, and so like a real life example, right? A service-based delivery organization versus advocacy-based, versus sort of small nonprofit that outsources a bunch of functions like accounting and IT and stuff versus larger nonprofits that kind of maybe have teams that do that. Like all of this impacts, right? How this shows up in an organization. I mean, think of a little baby nonprofit or someone that's brand new starting out. Like, I mean, at that point, it's going to be lopsided. It's going to look like, quote, they're not spending money on their mission potentially, like depending on how it's structured. I mean, I think about missions where there's significant professional expertise. I think of like medical fields or where you have like a nonprofit medical clinic that's got doctors and stuff. Like salaries and fees are going to be higher. And those are actually, to your point, back to FASB, should like count toward, program program expense because it's delivery of the program. But I think so many times, I think people maybe don't always understand those FASB regs. It might be helpful to put like a link to it about how do we classify. I don't know if people even know when they're doing the time study. If I don't even know if their nonprofits know how to classify it, because I do think sometimes they underestimate the amount of time that is spent actually on programs and oversight and impact. That's what I sort of sense. And I also think that, you know what, back to public perception, because that was part of the question. I mean, yeah, there are still people out there. There are still donors. There are still funders that say, what percent? Oh, good. You have this percent. And you know what I want to say? And Andy, this may make your skin crawl, but like, couldn't a nonprofit arguably just fudge the numbers because they want to get the percent? Like, oh yeah, we did a time study. And I realize this is not ethical. So what I'm about to suggest, but my point is, this is where the trap that this stupid percentage thing creates is people start to go, okay, well, yeah, like they somehow justify or convince themselves that it's not actually on overhead or admin because that's something negative or bad or wrong with it. Like, instead of actually saying, like, this is how much it costs to run an organization the right way. And so I will say this, and not all funders are evil, because some funders get this, and those are the ones you want in your court. I actually have worked with funders before where if the admin cost is too low, like they actually will ask a lot of questions about that. Like, wow, you say you only have 2 or 3% admin cost? Really? Like, how are you doing that? And I think that's just as important, like, as this. Anyway, I get off on my, did I make you cringe though? I do want to ask you, did I make you cringe with my comment about fudging numbers? I'm not suggesting people should. I'm just saying, but it's what this stupid thought, this mindset leads to.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that's a fair statement?
Yeah.
Not that it's right,
no,
but it leads to it.
And you do see that. You see that in because the truth is that where this pops up the most is in the 990. Like, it shows up in the 990 because you're required to do a functional expense statement in the 990. Any organization that's big enough to be audited by an actual auditor, they're going to give you the guardrails. You mentioned the FASB rules. Some of them are weird. Some of them are like, really? That's program? Really? That's fundraising? The one that we used to argue about the most was, and I always lost, was volunteer effort. So we used, my last big nonprofit, we used volunteers for a lot of stuff. They basically ran the operation in many cases. And all of that volunteer time, all of the effort that we put in to maintain those volunteers and make sure that they were fed and they knew what they were supposed to do and managed them, goes under fundraising. It doesn't go under program delivery. So everything that had to do with that volunteer department was fundraising. So what we do, to your point, but we didn't do it in the wrong way. We did it in the, okay, we're just going to have to look at this more carefully, is that what are we going to categorize as volunteer activities? So the volunteer manager is going to be responsible for this. These people used to be called volunteer coordinators because they were working with volunteers. They're no longer volunteer coordinators. They're operations coordinators. And now they're live under the operations section because they move product back and forth. They get things out of the rack in the warehouse, even though it supports the volunteer effort, right? So you can, to your point, if you're careful with it, you can kind of game the system a little bit within the rules. You want to play by the rules, but you want to like make sure you really understand the rules so you can play most effectively. Is that a super good use of people's time? Probably not. Like, there's probably better things you can do than try to figure out how you're going to min-max these numbers. To your point about seeing things that are red flags, anytime I see a nonprofit that has 0% fundraising on their functional expense statement, it tells me they don't know what they're doing and they don't know how to fill out forms. Like, that's, if you say it's 100% program, and there's a big national nonprofit that got hammered on this years ago. They had a donor give them money specifically to cover their fundraising and management and general expenses. So the donor gave them $5 million a year and basically paid for all of these things, by which they could then go out to the community and say, 0% of your donation goes to our overhead. Everything goes to program services. theoretically because this other donor was covering it. And the IRS just absolutely slapped them down, saying, well, that doesn't really count. Like, you can't advertise that you have no overhead just because somebody else is paying for it. You need to say, we've got all this overhead and we convinced this stupid donor to pay for it all. And so your donation doesn't necessarily cover that thing. It can cover something different. So there's a whole bunch of different ways you can use to play within the rules. And there's some that don't fall within the rules. I'd say when we're talking about this conversation in general, is that it's a red herring. That in Andy's world, when the auditor comes back and says 78% isn't good enough, Andy just like smiles and nods his head, because he knows that this is not, like, you don't know what you're talking about. Thanks for bringing up whatever you read wherever you read it. I've acknowledged that you've spoken to me, and that's about it. Because you don't need to worry about this at all. What you should really be focusing on is, how much does it cost to deliver our service? So overhead, program costs, fundraising costs, that's something that goes in the 990. It's factual information. It should be factual information. Your job should be trying to figure out, how do we deliver maximum service for the money that we raise? And that's what you should be reporting back. Like, we've talked about this infinite times now, but the food banks have it right when they say $1 equals 3 meals, because that means something to a donor. The donor doesn't care that the food bank has a 96% program service, because 96% of their money is spent on program. And it also doesn't make sense because a lot of that is donated food, and the value of that donated food counts in that bucket. Again, why it's not fair, and it shouldn't be used for anything, because it's random information in some cases. What they want to know is that they can connect $1 equals 3 meals. To me, that seems like a really good ratio, that if I give you $1, 3 people can eat a meal. That seems like a good ratio. So you have to find something that works for your organization, that connects the donor dollars specifically to your outcomes specifically, which then, as the other half of that, which means then you're really working on, how do I serve more people for the dollars that I have, which is a good thing to do. Not how do I play games how do I, play with the rules and try to come up with the right scenario that gives me the right points. Instead, you should be thinking about, how do I maximize the revenue that comes in, the resources that I have to deliver the best services that I can. That's the question you should be asking.
And I really think, to your point, being prepared to tell your financial story, being able, you've got to know your numbers enough and understand them enough that you're prepared to talk about them, and you're prepared to really tell sort of the picture of your nonprofit and your financial story. And I think the most powerful way, to your point, Andy, other than, I will say, right, there's plenty of funders out there that have the nice little, what is the percentage ratio back to this sort of question, right, that have that in there. But when you're talking to just donors, the $1 equals 3 meals, or this actually helps, this child have books, or whatever it is, this many books, that is what the majority of people, right? That's where they're coming from, unless they're trying to satisfy some of their own corporate hierarchy where they have to check some stupid box. It's just, I don't want to say it's totally it would be irresponsible for me to say you just ignore public perception of it, because I think, sadly, it exists, and it exists still. And we see it in grant. I see it the most in probably grant applications and grant, sort of the questions that come from that kind of arena versus, donors in general, aren't asking you, what is that percent? They don't even understand that question themselves, but they do want to know, but what is, are you impacting lives? What's the value? And so you said it succinctly. I think being able to message it like that, so that when you get pushback, or when you get that weird question, how, you have that nice little, it's in your back pocket. You don't get heated about it, because the other thing is, if you get heated, like we both have, and me particularly, if you get heated like that, it makes it look like you're defensive, or like you have something to hide. I just feel protected. I feel protective of the nonprofit sector, because this question makes me nuts, because of all the reasons we've said. And so that's where my anger comes from. So I probably wouldn't be a good person in that situation. But.
I think the question, because you mentioned that it comes up on grant applications, and the big difference between grant applications and working with an actual donor is that grant applications are trying to weed people out. They're not trying to find the best. They're trying to eliminate everybody that they don't think is the best. So they're looking for some sort of quantitative metric that they can use to just draw a line. So if you're talking to a donor and they're fixated on what your percentage of program expenses is relative to everything else, know that you haven't convinced them to donate to you yet. They're looking for a reason not to donate to you. And so you need to change the conversation and talk about what your impact and outcome is, and not about technical details of financial statements, which is super boring. Thanks for joining us today, Stacey and I appreciate that you've taken the time out of your busy nonprofit schedule, which, as we both know, is not just a polite thing to say. We know you guys are working really hard, and hope maybe this is a little bit of stress relief. I don't know. Hopefully it is a little bit of stress. I know it is for me. But
me too.
Send us your questions. We love that. Send us, share us with folks. If you got somebody you think might be interested in the podcast, just say, hey, there's this podcast that is actually pretty cool. You should listen to it. And Stacey and I would agree with that. You should definitely listen to it. One of the things that you'll notice about our podcasts is that we don't bring on people that are here to talk about their consulting companies or to try to sell you books or to try to sell you software. That's not our gig. We're here to answer your questions. So you have to send those questions to us so that we can either answer themselves or bring in a guest expert. There's no Patreon. Notice that. It's different from many other podcasts. We're here really just to serve the community. Stacey and I do this because we love it. We love getting the questions, and we honestly love just talking to each other. So I'm glad that you can join us.